The winds of Zanara whipped through the barren landscape, carrying with them fine grains of red sand that clung to everything it touched. Captain Marcus Hall surveyed the horizon from a rocky outcrop, his sharp eyes scanning for movement. The terrain was as unforgiving as it was alien: jagged cliffs, shadowed ravines, and an endless expanse of crimson dunes. Somewhere out there was the enemy, and Hall intended to be ready when they came. "Keen, status on comms?" Hall asked, his voice calm but firm. "Still no signal to the fleet, sir," replied Sergeant William Billy Keene, crouched beside a portable comms relay. He brushed sand from the device's interface, frustration etched across his face. "This storm's playing hell with the uplink. Best I can manage is local chatter." Hall nodded, masking his concern. Keene was the best tech specialist he'd ever worked with, but even his expertise couldn't overcome the sheer hostility of this planet. Nearby, Specialist Darnell Hayes inspected a stack of charges, his nimble fingers adjusting the wiring. The demolitions expert whistled a low tune as he worked, his carefree demeanor contrasting sharply with their dire situation. "Hayes, you planning to blow up the whole damn planet? Or just the parts we need?" quipped Corporal Ethan Ghost Miller, leaning against a rock with his sniper rifle cradled in his arms. Hayes grinned. "Just making sure the welcome mat's ready for our guests, Ghost. You know me. Always thinking about hospitality." The banter lightened the mood, but Hall knew it wouldn't last. They had stumbled into something far bigger than a routine recon mission. What had started as a survey of potential resource sites had turned into a desperate fight for survival. It had been 2 days since the ambush. The Rangers had barely escaped with their lives, their dropship destroyed in the opening salvo. The attackers, alien soldiers unlike anything Earth had ever faced, moved with precision and ruthlessness. 7 feet tall, with armored exoskeletons and plasma weapons, they were the perfect killing machines. The Rangers had fought back, using terrain and tactics to inflict casualties, but the losses had been heavy. Now, with supplies dwindling and reinforcements nowhere in sight, the team was on its own. "Movement," Ghost said suddenly, his voice low and urgent. He peered through the scope of his rifle, tracking a shadow on the horizon. "South Ridge. Could be a patrol." Hall grabbed his binoculars, adjusting the focus until he saw them. 6 Zeraxian soldiers, their angular forms shimmering with the faint glow of energy shields. "They're hunting us," Hall muttered. "Keene, pack it up. Hayes, secure the charges. We're moving." The team sprang into action, years of training kicking in as they dismantled their temporary camp. Within minutes, they were slipping through a narrow canyon, the rocky walls providing cover from prying eyes. Hall led the way, his mind racing. "We can't keep running," Reyes said, breaking the silence. The medic's tone was grim, his usual optimism worn thin. "They'll find us eventually." Hall stopped and turned to face his men. "I know, but we're not running. We're regrouping. If we're going to survive, we need a plan, and we need to hit them where it hurts." "Yeah," Hayes said. "And what part of Giant Alien Death Squad sounds like it's got a weak spot?" Keene spoke up, his voice steady. "Their tech isn't infallible. I've been analyzing their gear every chance I get. Those shields overheat if they take sustained fire. Their weapons, recharge cycles leave them vulnerable for a few seconds." "Sounds like a lot of ifs," Hayes said, his skepticism clear. "Maybe," Keene admitted, "but it's something. Better than waiting to die out here." Hall studied his men. They were battered, exhausted, and outgunned, but they were still Rangers. That meant something. "All right," he said. "We dig in here. Ghost, find a vantage point. Keene, I want comms up and running. Hayes, rig this canyon with everything you've got. If they want us, they're going to have to pay for it." The team moved with purpose, each man focused on his task. Ghost scaled a cliffside, his sniper rifle slung over his back. Keene set up the comms relay under an overhang, shielding it from the worst of the sandstorm. Hayes planted charges along the canyon walls, whistling his tune once more. Hours passed. The storm began to subside, leaving the air eerily still. Then came the sound they had been dreading, the steady hum of Zeraxian hovercraft. "They're coming," Ghost reported from his perch. Looks like 2 squads plus a transport. Hull's jaw tightened. Hold positions. Wait for my signal. The aliens moved into the canyon, their glowing shields casting an unnatural light on the rocks. Hull waited until the first squad was directly over Hayes' charges. Now, the explosion was deafening, the canyon walls collapsing in a cloud of smoke and debris. Zeraxian soldiers were thrown into disarray, their shields flickering under the onslaught. Ghost opened fire, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. Push forward, Hull shouted, leading the charge. The Rangers moved as one, their weapons chipping away at the enemy's defenses. Keen lobbed an improvised EMP grenade, the burst of energy shorting out half the remaining shields. The battle was brutal but brief. When the dust settled, the Zeraxians lay scattered across the canyon floor, their once imposing forms reduced to lifeless hulks. Hull surveyed the aftermath, his chest heaving. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. For every squad they defeated, more would come. "We can't keep this up," Reyes said, echoing the thoughts of everyone present. "No," Hull agreed. "But we're not done yet. If the Zeraxians think they can break us, they're in for a surprise. We're Rangers, and this fight, it's just getting started." The team gathered their gear and began to move. Their resolve hardened. Somewhere out there was a way to turn the tide. They would find it, or die trying. The fires from the canyon ambush had barely cooled when the Rangers relocated to an abandoned Zeraxian outpost nestled in a network of jagged cliffs. The structure was a testament to alien engineering, its sleek walls pulsating faintly with power. Though damaged in some past skirmish, it offered cover and a vantage point, advantages the team desperately needed. Inside, Sergeant William Billy Keene hunched over a console, his fingers flying across an alien interface that he had only just begun to decode. Symbols shifted and morphed on the translucent screen, refusing to stay fixed in form or meaning. Keene squinted, muttering to himself as he tried to force sense from the chaos. "Talk to me, Keene," Captain Marcus Hull said, standing behind him with arms crossed. "Trying, sir," Keene replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "This system doesn't think in straight lines like ours does. Everything's connected, every system loops back into another. But I'm starting to see patterns. Give me a bit more time, and I might be able to unlock something useful." Nearby, Specialist Darnell Hayes was dismantling a cache of captured Zeraxian plasma rifles. He worked quickly, his hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. "These cores are unstable, but if I can chain a few together, I can make something nasty. Something that'll make them think twice before rushing us again." "Do it," Hull said. "Always," Hayes replied with a grin, though his eyes carried a shadow of exhaustion. Up on the roof of the outpost, Corporal Ethan Ghost Miller lay prone, his sniper rifle resting on a bipod. Through the scope, he scanned the endless expanse of red dunes and jagged cliffs. The landscape was still, save for the faint shimmer of heat waves rising from the ground. "You see anything, Ghost?" Hull asked over the comm. "Not yet," Ghost replied. "But they'll come. They always do." In the corner of the room, Sergeant Michael Reyes unpacked medical supplies scavenged from their previous engagements. He worked methodically, patching up the cuts and burns that had become a grim routine for the team. "You know," Reyes said, "it wouldn't kill us to find some real supplies for once. Running low on just about everything." Hull nodded. "We'll make do. We always do." The captain turned back to Keene, who finally let out a triumphant laugh. "Got it," Keene exclaimed. "I cracked their system. At least part of it." "What are we looking at?" Hull asked. Keene's grin faded as alien schematics filled the screen. "This outpost isn't just some backwater station. It was a command hub, until we showed up anyway. There's intel here on troop movements, supply lines, and—" he paused, his expression darkening. "And Earth." The room went silent. "Earth?" Reyes said, his voice low. "They're preparing for a full-scale invasion," Keene said grimly. "We've got maybe days before their fleet mobilizes. If we don't stop them here, they're bringing the fight home." Hull clenched his fists, his mind racing. The Rangers had been fighting for survival, But now the stakes were far higher. Options? He asked, looking at his team. We hit them where it hurts, Hayes said, slamming a plasma core into a modified launcher. Take out their supply lines. Cripple their command structure. Easier said than done. Ghost chimed in over the comm. Their tech's light years ahead of ours, and they've got numbers on their side. Maybe, Keen said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. But I've been digging into their weaknesses. Those energy shields of theirs? They're tough, but not invincible. If we can overload their power sources, create an EMP large enough, we could level the playing field. And how do we pull off something like that? Hall asked. Keen hesitated. We need to raid one of their energy depots. There's one not far from here, according to these schematics. But it's heavily guarded. That hasn't stopped us before, Hall said. We've got the element of surprise and the will to win. Let's make it count. The team moved quickly, each man falling into his role with practiced efficiency. Hayes prepared explosives, Reyes packed a medkit, and Ghost adjusted his rifle for maximum range. Keen, meanwhile, loaded the schematics onto a portable device and began assembling the components for an EMP bomb. Night fell as the Rangers approached the depot, a sprawling complex of alien architecture glowing with an eerie blue light. The air buzzed faintly with the hum of machinery, and the scent of ozone hung heavy. From his vantage point on a ridge, Ghost marked targets. Guards on the perimeter, standard patrols. Turrets along the west wall. Looks like some kind of generator in the center. That's our target, Hall said. Keen, Reyes, you're with me. Hayes, plant charges along the perimeter. Ghost, cover us. The plan unfolded like clockwork. Hayes slipped through the shadows, his movements silent and deliberate as he set explosives at key points. Ghost picked off patrols with surgical precision, his shots barely audible over the hum of the depot. Hall, Keen, and Reyes made their way to the generator, avoiding the sweeping beams of alien drones. When they reached the massive structure, Keen immediately went to work, connecting the EMP device to the alien power grid. How long? Hall asked, his eyes scanning for threats. 3 minutes, Keen replied, sweat dripping from his forehead. Make it 2, Hall said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The hum of the generator grew louder as Keen completed his work. Suddenly, an alarm blared, the alien sound piercing and otherworldly. They know we're here, Reyes shouted, raising his rifle. Zeraxian soldiers poured into the depot, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. Hall and Reyes opened fire, their bullets sparking against energy shields. Almost there, Keen shouted over the chaos. Hayes' charges detonated along the perimeter, throwing the enemy into disarray. Ghost continued to pick off targets, his calm voice calling out over the comm, "Got your 6. Keep moving." Finally, Keen slammed the activation button on the EMP. Done. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the generator, knocking out lights, shields, and drones in an instant. The Zeraxians faltered, their advanced technology rendered useless. "Fall back," Hall ordered, leading the team out of the depot as explosions ripped through the structure. They regrouped on the ridge, watching as the depot collapsed in a cascade of fire and debris. For a moment, silence reigned. "Think they got their attention," Hayes said, breaking the tension. "Oh, it got their attention," Hall replied. "Now let's make sure they know who they're dealing with." The Rangers retreated into the night, their spirits bolstered by the small victory. But as the distant sound of alien reinforcements grew louder, they knew the battle was far from over. The wreckage of the Zeraxian depot still smoldered in the distance as the Rangers fortified their position in a nearby cave system. The EMP device had bought them time, but it also ensured the enemy's wrath. Every man understood the gravity of what they had done. Captain Marcus Hall knelt by the mouth of the cave, studying the terrain below through a pair of binoculars. In the dim starlight, the enemy forces moved with frantic purpose, assembling into tight formations as reinforcements arrived. The Zeraxians would come in overwhelming numbers, but Hall was already planning their next move. Behind him, Sergeant William "Billy" Keen worked feverishly on a damaged alien drone salvaged from the depot. The drone's sleek metallic body was marred by scorch marks, its circuits exposed like veins under torn flesh. Keen's focus was unwavering as he rewired its core. "If I can get this thing operational," Keen muttered, "we might just have a shot at overriding their comm network. Could give us a way to spread false orders or disrupt their reinforcements. Or it blows up in your face," Specialist Darnell Hayes quipped, leaning against a rock with a plasma mine balanced in one hand. "Every genius plan starts with a little risk," Keen shot back. "Focus, both of you," Hall said without looking up. "We don't have time for distractions." "Keen, how soon can you get that thing running?" "Couple of hours. Maybe less if I can get Reyes to stop hovering." Sergeant Michael Reyes raised his hands in mock surrender. "I'm just making sure you don't fry yourself. Wouldn't want the team to lose its resident tech wizard." Keen gave a small smile, but didn't look away from his work. The tension in the room was palpable, each man carrying the weight of the impending fight in his own way. Corporal Ethan Ghost Miller entered the cave, his rifle slung over his shoulder and a grim expression on his face. "We got company," he said. "Scouts, maybe a dozen. They're moving fast." Hall stood and shouldered his weapon. "Positions. Now." The Rangers fanned out, their movements precise despite their exhaustion. Ghost climbed to a ledge overlooking the cave entrance, his sniper rifle already trained on the approaching figures. Hayes crouched near the entrance, his explosives laid out like tools in an artist's kit. Keen stayed near the drone, his hand steady even as his heartbeat quickened. The Zeraxians came into view, their tall, armored forms gleaming faintly in the moonlight. They moved with unnerving synchronization, their plasma rifles at the ready. Hall raised a hand, signaling for patience. The aliens advanced further, stepping into the kill zone Hayes had prepared. When the lead soldier passed a concealed tripwire, Hayes detonated the charge. The explosion ripped through the air, scattering the enemy formation and shattering the eerie silence of the night. "Engage," Hall ordered, and the cave erupted in gunfire. Ghost shots rang out with precision, each one finding its mark. Hayes hurled grenades into the chaos, the bursts of plasma illuminating the battlefield in flashes of blue and white. Hall and Reyes moved in tandem, their rifles spitting fire as they held the line. The Zeraxians retaliated, their plasma bolts searing through the darkness. One struck the rock near Keen, showering him with debris. "I'm fine," Keen shouted, shielding the drone with his body. "Just buy me some time." The fight was brutal, each second stretching into an eternity. But the Rangers' tactics and tenacity turned the tide. When the last Zeraxian fell, the cave fell silent once more, save for the labored breathing of the men. Keen finally sat back, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's done," he said, holding up the drone. Its lights flickered to life, a low hum emanating from its core. "What's the plan?" Ghost asked, descending from his perch. "We use their own network against them," Keen said. "I can feed false signals into their command chain. Make them think Earth's sending reinforcements, big ones, enough to make them hesitate." "And what happens when they figure out it's a bluff?" Reyes asked. "By then, it'll be too late," Hall said. "We use the distraction to take out their command center. Without leadership, their invasion falls apart." The team moved swiftly, each man driven by the knowledge that failure was not an option. Keen guided the drone into the Zeraxian network, his fingers dancing over the alien console as he manipulated the signals. Within minutes, the false orders were broadcast, and the effect was immediate. Through binoculars, Hall watched as the enemy forces began to pull back, their movements hesitant and confused. "They're taking the bait," Ghost said, a rare note of admiration in his voice. "Good," Hall replied. "Now we finish this." The Rangers moved under cover of darkness, weaving through enemy lines toward the Zeraxian command center. The structure loomed ahead, its sleek, alien architecture pulsating with an ominous light. "Hayes, you're up," Hall said. Hayes grinned and set to work, planting charges along the support columns of the structure. Meanwhile, Ghost and Reyes provided cover, their weapons ready for any sign of trouble. Inside the command center, the team encountered stiff resistance. Zeraxian officers barked orders in their guttural language, their soldiers responding with lethal precision. But the Rangers fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Keen hacked into the central console, his fingers flying even as plasma bolts hissed past him. "Almost there," he shouted. "Hurry it up," Hayes yelled, firing into a cluster of approaching soldiers. Finally, the console's lights dimmed, and the room shuddered as Keen overloaded the command systems. "Time to go," Hall ordered. The team retreated as the charges detonated, the command center collapsing in a cascade of fire and debris. The shockwave knocked the Rangers off their feet, but they scrambled to their feet and kept running. When they reached a safe distance, they turned to watch the structure burn. "That's one way to send a message," Ghost said, his tone grim but satisfied. The Zeraxian forces, now leaderless and disorganized, began to retreat. The Rangers had done the impossible, turned the tide of an invasion with nothing but their wits and willpower. But as the team regrouped in the safety of the cliffs, Hall's expression remained serious. "This isn't over," he said. "They'll be back, stronger, smarter. But so will we." The Rangers nodded, their resolve unshaken. They had survived the impossible, and they would do so again. Together,